So today we turn to the last of the Andre Dubus short stories that are part of our course material, part of our ongoing conversation. This is the last of the 4 connected stories. They form a kind of novella themselves that focus on the characters of Ted Briggs and Luann Arsenault. This particular story is trying to think through some themes that we've already mentioned. Let me step back a little bit from the story first to say something about how these themes have entered into the course. One of the anxieties that seemed to be at the heart of Plato's Symposium, in some ways also Plato's Phaedrus, was an anxiety about how love or falling in love, about romantic love or erotic love, is related to our nature as embodied beings. Whatever it would be like for angels to fall in love, for human beings, the fact of our bodies, of bodily attraction, of sexuality, that fact has to be integrated into our sense of what love is, of what love can be. The speakers in the symposium reveal, perhaps sometimes betray, an anxiety about the fact of erotic attraction and the way it's driven through the body. So that in the Phaedrus, the speech of Lysias that Phaedrus has in his pocket makes a case for the non-lover, for somebody who's not erotically inclined. Socrates, in his reformulation of that speech, reveals to us that that speech itself is a lie. It's a cover story. Because the non-lover is in fact a lover, somebody in the throes of erotic attraction. So that the speech of the so-called non-lover is a speech that fails to recognize the depth and the honesty of sexual attraction. Socrates repudiates this way of responding to erotic attraction. And in the charioteer speech, he makes an attempt to give an account of love, of falling in love, that does justice to erotic attraction. In the symposium, the first 2 speakers, Phaedrus and Pausanias, both give an account of erotic love. Phaedrus on behalf of the beloved and Pausanias on behalf of the lover. Both give an account of erotic love that seems to squeeze out of it all of the sexual nature of erotic attraction, as if they don't trust themselves to love honestly in the face of the kind of special spark that our physicality, that our incarnation gives to our falling in love. Pausanias says something very interesting, and I think also very much a cover story, very much a way of making sex okay for himself in his speech, when he says that every action is neither good nor bad in itself. Its goodness or its badness depends completely, this is my language, not his, on the intentions with which we engage in that action. He says things like, say, giving speeches at a symposium like we're doing right now. Those actions can either be good or bad. It all depends what intentions they're done with. And Pausanias then applies this general principle that somehow our bodily actions themselves don't carry with them any significance or meaning. They're empty vehicles. They get their meaning only because we put meaning in from, so to speak, the psychic side of our lives. The soul part of us bears the meaning, not the bodily side. He applies this then to sexual relationships. He suggests that the sexual expression of love is good or bad based on the true thing. And that bodily expression isn't the real thing. The real thing is the psychic connection between two people. So that real intercourse is between souls. Bodies just happen to be along for the ride. So in Pausanias' picture of an authentically erotic relationship, the erotic component itself disappears. It turns out that the truly erotic, the authentically erotic relationship is a relationship of pedagogy, of teaching, of the lover teaching the beloved, initiating the beloved into a life of virtue. The emptiness of sexuality, the fact that it's a blank vehicle that must be filled with meaning, comes under increasing pressure as the dialogue goes along. One of the ways in the modern world that this question has become pressing is in practices of contraception. The Catholic teaching about contraception has consistently said that sexual intercourse itself already is full of meaning. It is not an empty vehicle that can be filled with better or worse meanings depending on your intentions. It bears a certain kind of meaning already, a kind of language of the body, as if sexual intercourse already bears with it an interpretation. So it's a kind of denial of Pausanias' strategy for controlling what's erotic in our lives. This question of whether the body itself is a source of meaning, or whether it itself is an empty vehicle, goes to the heart of certain kinds of questions about sexuality. The way that André Debus in the story Out of the Snow thinks his way down into this set of questions about the body and meaningfulness is through the notion of a sacrament. In a particularly striking section of the story, he has Luann reflecting on her experience, now not primarily as a lover, but as a mother. This is at the top of page 181. She's at a grocery store. She's buying food to make dinner for her children and her husband. Here's her reflection as she thinks about this activity, this apparently completely mundane activity of being at the grocery store. Now that she was gathering food for Julia and Elizabeth and Sam too, that is her children, she saw it in the store as something that would become her children's flesh. As a girl, she had learned about the 7 sacraments of the Catholic Church. all of them but one administered by a priest. The woman and man gave each other the sacrament of matrimony. Of course, what Dubusse is reporting there, or what Luann's reflecting on, is the Catholic Church's notion that there's a public part of the sacrament of marriage, the giving of the vows at the wedding, but that the sacrament is not completed until the man and woman make love as spouses. So that the action of making love, the sexual intercourse itself, is the physical expression of the verbal expression of the vows. So this is a reflection of the Catholic view of the intrinsic meaningfulness of sexual intercourse. It's not just a vehicle that can be filled with different meanings. It, so to speak, carries its significance with it. So that to express one's love sexually can be more or less honest, but the meaning is already there. And then he has this sentence. Being a mother had taught her that sacraments were her work, and their number was infinite. Among the sacraments, and perhaps Dubusse's favorites, are smoking and drinking. Her experience as a mother teaches Luann that the physicality of life is itself what's meaningful. It's meaningful to give your children food. It's not meaningful to give your children food only because of some more spiritual, more psychological, more soulful interpretation of that action. Your children are not souls who just happen to be driving around in bodies. Their bodies are as real as anything could be. Their bodies are ensouled. They're animate. And so the action of giving them food, of bringing them flesh, is itself what gives meaning to her life. So that Luann comes to understand everything she does that's bodily as sacramental. Sacramental in the sense that it's filled with a significance that has a sacred dimension to it. Does this mean that every time she cooks food that she tries to keep her hands folded or makes a sign of the cross? Well, no more than she does that in bed when she's making love with her husband, which one surely hopes isn't very often. To live out this bodily existence as sacramental doesn't mean living it out as always pious, as making a kind of show of piety. Indeed, it doesn't mean that at the level of passing consciousness, one is always thinking, well, I'm doing this for God. Cooking dinner in a busy household, let alone making love in a hot bedroom, is not the most typical place to have all your passing thoughts be, oh, I'm doing this for God. But the structure of one's mundane, everyday life might yet be a giving of something to God, or a recognition of something sacred in one's everyday life. So at least Luann lives it. So that Luann's practical love, her love as it's embodied in her actions, is a reflection of a certain kind of commitment to significance and to meaningfulness. One that in this story is understood as sacramental. Does that mean that she always has the sorts of thoughts that one has in church or in a confessional? Of course not. Luann doesn't value thoughtfulness in a way that splits thought from action. It's significant sacramental action that's the bearer of meaning for her. Not, as Pausanias would have it, an empty action that's then only filled with meaning, depending on what intentions we bring to it. This sacramental sense of herself that Luann has is worked out in this story through a threat to her bodily, the threat that she'll be raped by these terrible men who follow her home from the store. The story ends with Luann reflecting with Ted on her own experience of fending these men off, particularly of beating the hell out of one of them with a frying pan. What Luann reflects on is the fact that her bodily actions in striking these men do not fill her either with some sort of satisfaction. She's certainly happy that she wasn't raped, and that she beat them off and escaped from them. But she takes no great joy in just having hit them. But on the other hand, she doesn't feel sad that she broke their noses and might have killed them. She feels something that's not well captured by thinking of it either as sad or as happy. Her word for this is rapture. She felt a kind of rapture, a word that would have been at home in the charioteer speech in the Phaedrus, a kind of leaving of oneself. The rapturousness in which she defends her own bodily integrity surprises her, stuns her, leads her to try to reflect on it at the end of this story. Her rapture in the moment of defending her bodily integrity against these criminals reveals to her something about all of her life. Extremity is often the revelation of ordinariness. And so for her in this story, her living out everydayness as sacramental is interpreted for her by her experience of self-defense as rapturous. She thinks about this in terms of a radical presentness, that she tries to live her life by being present in every moment, making every moment, even the most mundane moments, something meaningful, something that reflects her larger life commitments. This notion of being present all the time in everything she does is something that comes home to her in the extremity of needing to do violence to other human beings to defend herself. She does not enjoy doing that violence, but neither does she regret it. So that by the time we get to the end of the story, we're led to some disquieting reflections on the way that our bodies are not the vehicle of meaning, but are rather the source of it. A thought that comes to me at the end of this story involves the difference between our experience of evil through our bodies and the experience of good. If a beating is a big deal, an important thing, and a rape is a yet much more important thing, and the taking of a life and a murder is a bigger thing still, why shouldn't a caress also be a big thing? And making love an even bigger, more important thing? And the conception of a new life, rather than the murderous destruction of one, be a yet bigger thing still? Shouldn't the seriousness of our dread and our revulsion of the one find its full complement in the seriousness of our awe and our joy in the other? We deprive our lives most perversely, it seems to me, when we let our bodies count so much for ill and so little for good. The laws of symmetry require the exaltation of the loving body to match the degradation of the broken one. It seems to me here in this Holy Week that our reflections on the most famous of all broken bodies might be helped if we think of the necessary symmetries of how our bodies are also sources of the significance of love. Have a good Easter. See you when you're back.